The Morning Dump from Hurrdat Sports with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning.
He's back. DB in-house. It's the Morning Dump. Andrew Rogers, Damon Benning. The only place for extra conversation, extra everything, really, that comes surrounding the sports world. Today's topic, season openers for college basketball. Big day, big Tuesday of college basketball. How many games were there, like 30?
Yeah,
80?
there were a ton, and all the local yokels were in business, so it kept me busy. It was so bad, Drew Down, I watched my favorite team on recording. I saved North Carolina till after 10:30.
I forgot you're a UNC guy.
Oh, yeah.
So what do we have here? UNC, Pittsburgh Penguins, Pittsburgh Steelers?
Correct.
And the Dodgers?
And the Lakers.
So DB just choosing winning teams.
Everybody says that, but you should probably check like the last 25 years. I mean, it's all relative.
But I know
right?
UNC won a national title within
It's
there.
It's all relative.
Numerous ones.
They
The
got a
Steelers
couple.
have a Super Bowl, a couple of World Series for the
Yeah,
Dodgers.
Steelers haven't been to the Super Bowl since 2012.
Yeah, but they did win.
Well, they lost to Green Bay.
Well, I was more implying the
Arizona
Kurt
Cardinals.
Warner,
Yeah.
Kurt Warner game.
The most overrated, exciting, non-exciting
catch.
game ever. That game boiled down to about 4 minutes, and everybody say, "Oh God, it was so exciting."
It's
The
exciting.
ending was exciting. The game was actually trash.
I think the biggest misconception is that Hines Ward caught that football. Like,
Wow, are you really going there? Are you really going there? I think that was a hand pass by Petrangelo.
Selfish.
But we don't get into specifics.
Oh, man.
It's all right.
Let's talk basketball. Creighton got a win against St. Thomas. Nebraska got a win against Maine. Omaha fell to KU. Nebraska women beat Omaha. That game was a massive victory for the Huskers, 100-33. And then Creighton women got the win against South Dakota State, the only
That's a good
top
win.
25 matchup of yesterday's slate. Big win, yes, for Creighton. The Creighton women kind of hung around most of that game, and then, basketball's a game of runs. It was those couple of runs in the second half that really put Creighton ahead.
Yeah, I'm a huge, and hopefully you are too, I'm a huge women's sports fan, and I'm a team, Coach Booth, Amy Williams, used to be Amy Gusso when we went to school together. She was my neighbor, so I'm extremely close and followed that program even when she was in South Dakota. And the cool thing about Creighton and SDSU is with the coaches having such a good relationship, Coach Flan and that bunch, I said Coach Booth, I'm thinking volleyball. Coach Flan having such a good relationship, Creighton's non-con is going to be pretty competitive because they will get some good draws. And when you're going to play in Nebraska, when you're going to play in SDSU, those are quality non-con opponents. And you add that with what they're going to do in the Big East, Coach Flan's going to set his team up for success. He's going to play the long game. With Nebraska women, a couple of unbelievable statistics in that football or that basketball game. Everybody talks about not shooting a free throw, which you'll never see in a game in which they scored 100. But every single player that played made a three.
That's crazy.
How about that?
I didn't even see that on the box
Co-
score.
Coach, my guy, Matt Coatney, who does the play-by-play with Jeff Greesh. And
He is your guy.
well, those guys were like giving me a hard time during the broadcast yesterday, and I just happened to be listening because I was on the move yesterday, and I like women's basketball, and Coatney got in a couple shots, but it's okay. That's my dude. He's one of those people, Drew Down, where you always have to be on your toes because he's very quick. He's extremely sarcastic, and don't get caught watching the paint dry.
Not with him?
Nah, he'll get you.
Not with him?
He'll get you.
Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you just kind of went into major detail with how the women fared yesterday, Tuesday night basketball slate, Tuesday afternoon for one of those.
Yeah,
basketball
very.
games.
Nebraska tipped at noon.
But you look at, let's go with Creighton here.
Okay.
9th team in the country. You come into this matchup, and of course, you have such high expectations for this group. And then you only see anywhere from a 10 to really 15-point swing for most of the game. Early on in that game, I think it was 26 to
well, the largest
13,
the largest
something.
lead was 15, and
Yeah.
that was in the first half.
Yeah. So you look at that. Creighton didn't shoot the ball all that well. I think they know that. Not from behind the arc especially.
Yeah, 8 of 34.
The Tommies shot 42% from three. Any team can stay in a basketball game if you shoot 42%. Plus, St. Thomas likes to shoot the three, so they shoot it often. They also got points in the paint, though. And, despite popular belief of Kalkbrenner being, this huge statue in the middle of the paint, the Tommies were still finding ways to get around him, getting points in the paint. They were finding their ways to score. Now, Kalkbrenner, that's not a knock on Kalkbrenner at all. He is one of the best defenders in all of college basketball. But it just goes to show that any team can show up and play no matter what conference you're in, no matter how big your school is, no matter if you were a D3 team just a couple of years ago and are now a D1 team. The Tommies, little underestimated coming into this matchup.
Yeah, no question. They can shoot the ball, and you know what? They're not necessarily – Creighton's not playing to their defensive strengths, really, with – you have a couple of rim runners and a really good rim protector in Kalkbrenner, arguably the best defensive player.
And I believe he read he was sick or dealing with an illness.
In the Big East, but the way that St. Thomas plays, his presence at the rim is a non-factor. When you have your 4s and 5s that play stretchy, he is out away from the rim, and – depending on how Creighton will handle ball screens going forward and whether everybody will have sort of that recipe for getting him out away from the game, putting him in two-man ball screens and stuff like that, you may see some of his defensive prowess neutralized a little bit until you get into conference where, you'll get the Snogos of the world who will have good post presence and you can play a little bit more traditional. But for right now, with some of these smaller opponents, you may not see Kalk's defensive presence. But I think the point you made is they didn't shoot the ball very well. They shot 25% from three in the first half, 22% from three in the second half. And
it took until the last 10 minutes to really accumulate a run.
Yeah. And, they shot 41% in the first half from the floor, but just 36% from the field in the second half. So, listen, your Coach Mack, you're already going to have some schedule or some rotational constraints, right? How to manage minutes, right? A guy like Sharif Mitchell only played 8 minutes last night. What do you do with Miller and Farabello? And those things will come, right? But if you're Coach Mack, you want to stay sharp. Coaches just don't want to say, hey, here's the ball, go play. You want to coach. And this team showed that they still need a ton of coaching, a lot of work, a lot of chemistry. It's just game one. Now, if they'd have come out hitting on all cylinders and shot 51% from three and 60% from the field and their defensive efficiency was lights out, you'd be like, whoa, are they peaking too early? I always love the hot takes.
We're all about hot takes.
But, it's cool isn't the word, but it's kind of cool that they showed that they were at least human with all the preseason hype.
Well, and I like the way you put that because I was sitting on my couch this morning typing up my notes, and then I went to go take a shower. And I was standing in the shower, and all best ideas come in the shower, right? And I was standing there.
Usually good music for me, but hey.
Yeah, no, you know what? I just kind of sit there and reflect in my own thoughts.
I had
the
Bluetooth audio speaker I plugged in.
The water just dripping off my
fantastic.
face. Yeah.
The 4-year-old banging on the door.
Yeah, I don't have one of those.
I need to get my toothbrush. But anyway, there were
Princess
no good
Peach.
There were no good thoughts. Miss High Maintenance had her little ponies going this morning.
Now, I was standing in the shower, and I'm like, I got it. I know the question I'm going to ask DB today.
Uh-oh.
Because I like to just sit back and really make him think because he's a philosopher, right?
Are you a philosopher? Yes, I think very deeply.
But then I got out of the shower, completely forgot my question. Because
What's that?
I brushed, brush the hair, get it all going, brush the teeth, get clothes on, sit down on the couch. I'm ready to type it down. It's like Jerry Seinfeld in that episode where he thinks of the joke in his dream, and he writes it down, and he's like, it's not actually that funny. That's kind of how I think about my question now as I try to put it onto paper. I have the idea, so just go with it, and we'll go from there.
The art of the improv.
Yes.
Let it ride.
So,
Russ?
does the non-conference schedule tell you more or give you a better season expectation of the good team in the matchup or the smaller school in the matchup?
Oh, boy. That's tough. Typically,
because you learn a lot from both.
Generally speaking, I'll say the smaller school. Only because I think in the non-con, especially if you're a team, let me give you a caveat.
Sure.
Especially if you're the team coming off a successful run from the previous year. Because what human nature will tell you is, man, we got to get – you want to fast forward all the many steps. You want to get right back to where you were and get another shot at it. So you're thinking Sweet 16, Elite 8, because that was the goal for last year, and you know what folks are saying, if you're talking about a team like Creighton, right? So it's hard to want to get in the minutia and the grind of the day-to-day. Meanwhile, smaller school teams or the underdogs are thinking, this is our shot. This is our shot. Let's get better.
I'm all about the nothing to lose.
And they're just the opposite of how to look at conference play, right? Whether it's this will get them ready for conference play more than the more successful program or the bigger school is saying this will get us ready for conference play. You know what I mean? So I typically give the advantage to smaller schools in the non-con. And, you know, Creighton will get their fair share of a look once they get to the tournament and maybe could run into a team like Arkansas in the second round.
Good angle. I actually think it matters more for the big school because – for one, you learn a lot about your team. You're learning through, with the transfer portal being such a big thing for the big schools over anybody else. You're learning how to, like you say, manage people's minutes, but also see who steps up in leadership ways on bigger teams, on those teams that have higher expectations. And then it's how you battle through adversity throughout certain games. The Creighton game, for example, is the perfect one to pinpoint here. Because it's so close, it's how does Creighton not get embarrassed on national television now to a team like St. Thomas? As much as it's great for St. Thomas to be like, hey, we're going to be awesome in conference play, like we're putting together a great team, and other teams are going to recognize, hey, we have a ton of talent here, and we're going to be successful. I think it also tells a lot, too, about the big school and saying, like, hey, we can find ways to win games no matter what, whether we're playing a team that may not be as evenly matched up to us on paper or if they're just as close to us on paper. You talk all the time, too, about a team playing down to their opponent in basketball games. That wasn't the case here. It was just the matter of missing shots. But you take a look at that TCU game against Arkansas Pine Bluff, and it's the way to still find a way to win a basketball game.
Yeah, so I think basketball is a little different in my opinion, especially with the transfer portal. And the three-point line in basketball is the great equalizer. And if you're shooting it well with such a small margin of error, I mean, the ball and the way that the cylinder is made, when those two things coexist, your margin for error is minuscule. And so I think with the ability to, it's a make or miss game, and the three-pointer is the great equalizer. And so I think if you're shooting it well, you always have a chance. And it's not so much about the physics like it can be in some other sports, like hockey. You see these big, strong skaters, or their skill through, skating through the neutral zone, and you're like, whoa, like that team is significantly better physically. Or football, where it's really easy, right? Big guy, small guy, fast guy, slow guy, things like that. But in basketball, just the ability to shoot the three on any given night. And the transfer portal in basketball is the greatest of equalizers. You'll see so many good players at various levels that have had other previous pit stops or could go to another school, yet they pick your school because of fit. And it's like, you're going to run into some ballers on almost every roster.
To add to
right?
that, you look at how little a team is in basketball opposed to football. You have 5 opposed to 11.
Yeah.
So you're grabbing a guy that may be a 5-star athlete that went to go play at the biggest school out there.
In basketball, you need 3 good players.
Yeah, but say you
In football, you need
right.
80% of your guys better be able to go.
You go to Duke and you're a 5-star athlete, but you may be riding the bench because you have 6 other 5-star athletes at that school. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you find this 5-star athlete going back to their hometown, say that their hometown's in Utah, so they go play at BYU, and now at BYU you're an absolute superstar. But that's because, like you said, you have so many great players, but there's not enough room for a lot of these guys half the time. And the transfer portal is so deadly in college basketball because of that, opposed to football. Now, looking at a little bit more with the transfer portal, you look at Sam Griesel, North Dakota State transfer that is playing at Nebraska. Did I interrupt you? Or are we
no, I was just going to say, because you hit close to home with the hometown thing. I got a guy like Dawson Garcia who was supposed to be everything at Marquette. He transfers. He goes to Carolina. So I was like, ooh, nice. They need a big. Well, he disappears. Halfway through the season last year, some illness, COVID, doesn't really come back. Team's not really notified. You're like, oh, he probably just wants to be someplace closer to home. Yeah, Dawson Garcia went for 23-7 last night for the Minnesota Golden Gophers, and it's like, all right, he pops up on their roster, and keep in mind they only beat Western Michigan last night by 1. It was 61-60, so it's not like they run away with this thing.
Good defensive team in football. That's a perfect defensive team in basketball.
But that's a perfect example of what you're talking about, where if he can have that kind of impact, especially with the wings and the stretchies, the 4s. In the Big Ten Conference, the guy just fell in your lap.
Well, a lot of times you
forget. Hometown guy, and you're like, wait a minute, is that the same? Yeah, that was the Gatorade player. The guy that was top 5 in the country 2 years ago that went to Marquette. Yeah, that's that Dawson Garcia. That's what happens in basketball.
You forget that these are kids, 18 to 22-year-old kids that have feelings, that have emotions, that have the ability to be homesick, whether they're the best basketball player or not. So that's why you see a lot of movement like that. That's also another reason why it's so crucial, in my opinion, for somebody to have some sort of hometown connection everywhere they go, whether it's the coach, whether it's a teammate, whether it's family that live in that state, or whether they have parents that move with them. It's having some type of family connection anywhere you go,
or security,
to bring you back to your roots, or a security blanket.
Because it's tough, right? College is tough.
It is. All in all, especially to be an athlete, that's a job.
It's difficult.
And you have to balance not only your sport and whether you have a ton of hype on your back too, coming into this school, being like, hey, you're going to be the savior of this program, but you also have to be like, oh, I'm going to school too.
Yeah.
And you're trying to balance both, and then, now you're trying to balance your social life mixed in there. It is a lot for an 18 to 22-year-old kid to be put through that. So that's why it's nice to always have some type of hometown root, in my opinion, or a security blanket, as you mentioned.
And let's not forget, too, winning is hard. We talk about it as though it's this
and it's everything.
It's very sequential. Well, if you just do this, then winning's tough.
It's everything to college athletes.
Yeah. Highly competitive.
Sam Griesel at Nebraska, talk a little bit about this victory over Maine. Nothing overly impressive outside of the fact that Nebraska can rebound, right? And that's a problem.
At least last night.
That's a problem that we've seen at least over the course of last year, but even years prior to that. You talk about rebounding and the ability to turn boards into buckets, and that's exactly what Nebraska did. That's what fueled their victory over Maine. Maine with some tremendous shooters on that team, but leadership is probably one of the biggest things that Nebraska has been trying to find this year, because you don't have that go-to player anymore. You don't have McGowan's. You don't have that veteran in the system to really be like, hey, we're coming together as a team, and this is how we're going to produce on the floor. Sam Griesel's that type of player. Comes from North Dakota State. He's a hometown kid. Again, I'm bringing up that hometown argument, but he's got senior leadership. Mm-hmm. He's a veteran. He knows what it takes to win basketball games at all levels now. I think he's a true blessing
definitely
for the Huskers.
A winner. Was a winner before he transferred. Was a winner at Lincoln East. And I do think that there's something to that pedigree. And listen, if you're Nebraska and you're still trying to figure out, that you think Breidenbach is not where he's going to be, but he's working his way. He shot the ball well last night, coming off the bench. Still not sure what you're going to get from Denham Dawson, but you do like Gary. You like Griesel, you like Blaze Keita. So you have some pieces. Nebraska, for the basketball standpoint, the thing that I'll be interested in, can they embrace their identity? They look like a team that kind of wants to be defensive-minded. They've talked a lot about it in the offseason. They want to guard. They want to touch. They want to get stops. If they can embrace that and kind of just know who they are so they know what to fall back on in crunch time like we've talked about, like, hey, when it gets nut-cutting time, who are we, right? Like, that's always going to matter. That's the same as life, right? Who am I? Can they be that team? That would be interesting because it's not always going to be pretty.
Maine's basketball roster, too, is insane with some of these names.
Yeah.
Did you, listen to pronunciations?
No.
I mean, can you imagine being the broadcaster for this Maine team? You're taking kids from Turkey, Canada, Nova Scotia.
Yeah,
all over the place.
That was tough.
And I'm over here, and I'm like, oh, my gosh, England. And then, okay, now you have, somebody at least relatively normal.
You've done this before, but, you get ready to do a broadcast, and you always – the visiting team will come over and they say, hey, do you guys need anything?
Pronunciations.
Hey, do you have a pronunciation key? Right. And sometimes I'll already have it taped up for
this
you
whole
and
team
stuff like
you
that.
need it for, except for Owen Maloney.
Yeah.
That's the only name that you don't need it for.
Even the hyphenated last name with McClesh, you're like, is that right?
Well, because you have an apostrophe halfway through his first name, and then you have an asterisk above his E.
I get it. We all can't be Andrew Rogers.
No, I don't think we want to be because I can't pronounce half of these names on this main roster.
It's just easy breezy. This is Andrew Rogers.
Oh, yeah. You mean first and last name.
Yeah,
Damon Benning's a pretty easy one, too.
Well, sometimes you'd be amazed. I get Damone. It's like, where do you see that?
Damone.
Where do you see that?
Where's the E? Where's the A in the mix?
The occasional Damien. Where do you see that?
Damien.
Oh, that's a pet peeve, too.
Really?
Yeah.
Damien Benning.
Doesn't have anything to do with the omen either, but. No, that's not your boy.
Moving across to Kansas, Omaha, a game that I feel a lot of people thought was going to be much greater in regards to the scoring margin, but it wasn't. Omaha, believe it or not, was the only local team out of those three from the men's side that covered last night. And they stuck around with KU most of the day. They stuck around with the former national champions. I'll put my money on Omaha.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. And you know what I like about Omaha is they got a lot of guys that, number one, they have two coaches in Crutchfield and Crandall that went to school with Kenny, a very good friend, Coach Crutch. Got a fantastic relationship with. I love the way that they've recruited. They went long and they went big. I don't know how sustainable it is getting in the portal the way that they did with junior college and the transfer route, but they got long, basically.
They got big
overnight, right? Where they can now go 6'7", 6'6", 6'8", and be okay with that. And they have a potential star, conference star in Frankie Fiddler, the Bellevue West product, and they got good minutes, 27 minutes last night from the Creighton Prep star. Luke Jungers, who really provided them with some punch, who's been much better than advertised, I think, especially early in camp, starting to really turn some heads. So good on those guys. And listen, if you're Coach Self, it's been a weird offseason. You're coming off a national championship, so you're automatically the hunted, top 5 team in the country. You've got some self-imposed sanctions where you're kind of shuffling voices in and out of that huddle, and that's a tough home opener, I think, when Omaha comes to town, because like we were debating earlier, is it easier for the big school or the small school? That's one of those.
In this case, I think this was the page turner that Omaha needed, especially those returners on the roster. Kyle Ludke, Creighton Prep guy. Akala Rope, Creighton Prep guy. Grant Frickenstein, still on the roster. Archbishop Bergen, I believe.
No.
And
he got a few minutes left.
Frankie Fiddler. who, as you said, Bellevue West guy. These are guys that were on the team last year and went through the worst of the program.
Yeah.
And now you get a ton of fresh faces. You have, like you said, Coach Crutchfield, brand new head coach. Oh, I forgot about Dylan as well. Dylan Broham, I believe.
Broham, yeah.
Man.
How good, in your opinion, are Grady Dick
Lamel was on the team too.
And Jalen Wilson? And Kansas has a couple fellas.
Yes, they do.
They got a couple fellas.
Yes, they do. But in regards to Omaha, J.J. White and Jaden Marshall, I was talking to Kyle Ludke over the weekend before they made this trip to Kansas, and he said these guys can be really good. Yeah. Like if these guys are winners with the ball in their hand. They just have to believe that they can do it most of the time. And all I need to hear from this team is just now having guys that last year it was always Frankie Fiddler. Get the ball to Frankie Fiddler. He's going to win you this basketball game.
Need a little more stability in the backcourt and a little more length in the front court.
And now they have it. Yeah. They put the pieces together. I'm so excited to burn the sheet from last season and go into this year with a fresh slate, especially with the expectation they just set for me with this game against Kansas.
Yeah, and if you believe that the Summit Championship runs through the Dakotas, which it often does, you like the makeup of this roster at least early.
And I think some big changes have been made over in Omaha, and it's all for the better at this point.
And they have a fantastic athletic director.
Sure do. AD the AD.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I'm not the first one to say that, so don't give me credit.
He's going to be the deal. He's going to be the real deal.
Funny thing about Adrian, so I was walking down, Caniglia Field?
Very well.
Yep. So you know how many stairs it takes to get up to the press box? Like you're huffing and puffing by the time you get up there, especially if you work out as much as I do. And I walked down because I was going home before I was going to come back for the hockey game over the weekend. I was walking down the stairs and I stopped by AD. And AD, I mean, he's got swag. Like Ray-Bans on. Yeah. He's got like a Lululemon jacket or an Adidas
Max and
jacket.
These guys, the kiddos, they call that drip.
Oh, they got drip.
He's got drip.
Hey, no cap. But he got it. I sat.
Will Teeman, how are you this morning?
I sat next to AD, more like stood next to him, and one look at him, and I just guess what I realized I was missing. It was a sunny day.
Glasses.
It's my sunglasses.
Yeah.
Up in the press box still. Because he was wearing Ray-Bans, and I knew my Ray-Bans were still sitting up there. He's like, oh, dude, they'll be protected up there. I said, yeah, but I have to drive home now. And the sun sets toward Lincoln when you're driving from Omaha, right?
Yeah, I think it's good.
So it would blind my eyes. So I had to walk all the way back up the stairs to walk all the way back down.
I can't see so good.
I had to walk all the way back up.
My shoes and my glasses so I have them.
Not really.
A little Jerky Boys reference.
Although AD, low-key, how he shaves his head, I mean, it looks like the bottom of the sled that Clark Griswold greased up.
Wow.
Like, that's AD's head.
That's a heck of an analogy.
It's a shiny head.
Heck of an analogy.
And I tell him that all the time. I'm like, do you ever cut your head when you shave?
You don't lack
He's
for
like,
creativity.
yeah, every now and then. But I'm like, never would have guessed.
Yeah,
He's a king.
but still,
He's a king at shaving his head.
Team swag.
Would you ever shave your head bald?
No.
Ever?
See, DGB doesn't stand for Damon Gregory Benning. It stands for Don't Go Bald.
Don't go bald.
Facts.
I love how quick you had that. So somebody asked you that before.
No, I'm.
You're not that witty.
You kind of.
Oh, toot your own horn now.
Like Major Payne.
What comes next for these teams? Who knows as the stretch of the season starts to finally get into conference play. A lot of non-conference games still to come. Some good scheduled basketball games ahead for all 6 of these programs. I missed Omaha because Nebraska played Omaha. All 6 of these programs here locally. I'm excited, and as everybody else is, just completely wrapped up in Creighton this year. 9th best team in the nation. It's going to be the biggest storyline locally for months to come in regards to college basketball, whether they win or whether they lose. This team can come back from really anything. They have the strength and the numbers to do that. So if you see Creighton lose a game that you're like, oh, man, they shouldn't have lost that game, well, guess what? No basketball team goes undefeated.
Yeah, I think they'll start 4-0, and then we'll see what happens once. I'm looking at that Arkansas game in the second round potentially is a pretty good litmus test, because I think with what will be 5 games under their belt, maybe they'll kind of settle in. Rotations will start to kind of take shape. We'll see what happens.
As for Nebraska, I think I'm going to echo what I said earlier. Finding that go-to player early on in the season and continuing to rebound.
Scoring will be the thing for them. Who's going to get you a bucket when that clock winds down?
And then with Omaha, it's a totally revamped roster. That's exciting in itself. The Nebraska women and Creighton women are just carrying over bodies from last year. They're going to be just as strong as they were. And then the Omaha women's basketball team, interested to see how they respond and if they can respond like the men's team is going to do over in Omaha.
Yeah, Carrie Banks can coach, and she's done a good job recruiting, so we'll see what happens once they get their legs underneath them. Graduated a lot in the post in terms of experience.
And Grace Cave, the sophomore out of Weeping Water, she's a player.
Yeah.
And she can absolutely score when the time comes down to it. And Elena Pilacuda in the middle is a big body, one of the bigger post players in the Summit. She can be a threat, too, when she wants to be. So there's a lot of good local college basketball taking place this season. We hope you're following along. We'll be helping you cover it throughout the way. DB, Andrew Rogers, that's your morning dump. Get on with your day. Wipe, move on. We'll see you tomorrow.